Hello and welcome to Read Brave, a comics podcast. From the Graphomania Podcast Network, I'm Vinton Bain.
Cory Casto.
Scout Casto.
What just happened?
So this is our 21st episode, and now we're legal.
We should all have like a shot of that whiskey.
We can drink the hard stuff like Mike's Hard Lemonade and wine coolers. Zima, yeah.
That's the first thing I bought when I was 21. I didn't know any better.
Well,
I went to 7-Eleven and bought a thing of Zima.
And remember, kids, you have to be 21 before you drink, and then drink responsibly.
Correct.
So today on the podcast, we have a segment where we got to interview Liz Prince, and it's going to be so exciting. We're going to go through our normal comic book stuff first, but then later on in the podcast, we'll have a segment talking with her.
You know, we've interviewed a few local creators, and we were really excited to be able to interview them. But I think that all three of us, if we made a list of our favorite creators, Liz Prince would definitely be at the top part of the list.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So it was definitely a honor to have her for like our first nationally known creator. Okay, so in honor of our 21st episode, I read 3 comics this week because 3 times 7 is 21, which is our 21st episode.
7 is like the number of completion, they say.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So I completed 3 comics.
I get it. Well, since you didn't read very many, but you did say you read ones that you didn't think we would have read.
Yes.
Why don't you go first? What did you read?
Okay, so the first comic I read, or that I want to talk to you about, is called The Visitor, How and Why He Stayed.
I've been wanting to read this.
What?
I'm kidding. I didn't.
Gotcha.
Gotcha journalism. So The Visitor and How and Why He Stayed is kind of a spin-off of Hellboy, and it's like it talks about Hellboy's origin story. It's about an alien visitor sent to take out Hellboy at his birth, but when he sees Hellboy, he decides, I can't do it. I feel like that there's a reason that this person or this thing should live. And so it was an interesting perspective into Hellboy's life. I really enjoyed it. My daughter really likes Hellboy, and I think that she will really enjoy reading it. It was written by Mike Mignola and Chris Robertson, who also wrote iZombie. Illustrated by Paul Grist, colors by Bill Crabtree, and letters by Clem Robbins. So it was good. The illustration was very reminiscent of Mignola's art, which I kind of feel like no matter who illustrates the Hellboy, whatever comics Hellboy is about, like it all has that same kind of style.
Yeah.
But it also kind of reminded me of Brandon Graham's art and Andrew McLean's art, the guy that does Headlopper. So I enjoyed it. I like that one. I also read The Old Guard, #1.
Oh, it's another one I've been wanting to read.
It was written by Greg Rucka, illustrated by Leandro Fernandez, colors by Daniela Miwa, and letters by Jody Wynn. And so the main character is named Andromache, which is like a Greek character, but also an Amazonian warrior. And the name means man battler.
I like it.
It was pretty awesome. The first page, the description says, "This is a fairy tale of blood and bullets. It is a story of one woman and 3 men who cannot die, mostly. Their names are Andy, Nikki, Joe, and Booker. It is a story about time and age and ages and about friendship and love and regret." And I feel like they got to at least half of those things in the first issue. It was enough to keep me on for a second issue. I kind of felt like it was like the Punisher if he was female and he was the Highlander, except not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect sense.
Yeah.
Nothing has ever been clearer than that synopsis.
Okay, and then the last thing that I read that I wanted to mention was a one-shot called The Belfry.
Oh, yeah.
Written and illustrated by Gabriel Hardman, who also does Invisible Republic and Kinski, which are both on Image Comics. It is definitely, without a doubt, an adult comic. So I would not recommend it for children to read at all. It's a horror comic about vampires, and the take on vampires I felt like was really original. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I liked it. So if you like horror comics and you are a grown up, you should read The Belfry. Scott, what did you read?
Well, I read issue 3 of Mother Panic. Still just so heavy. I don't know if this might be my exit point, to be honest with you guys. I don't know. I think that, and Cory, you mentioned last when we were talking about Lego Batman about how you don't always need brooding Batman. And I feel like I don't always need every story within the Bat family to be so heavy.
Yeah.
I think this is part of why I love Batgirl so much, is she's in the Bat family, but it doesn't make me want to cry every time. I mean, it's extremely well written and they're doing a great job with it. This issue, it was really fun to see Batwoman. That was the only really high point for me, but everything else was just more of the sad. So
Yeah.
not sure. I mean, the young animal stuff, it's kind of getting to where I think that I've read enough to know that from this point on, I think Doom Patrol and Shade the Changing Girl are going to be the two that I really read every issue as they come out. Everything else I may need to wait for trades or decide if I want to go further with them.
Yeah.
Gamora, number 3, my favorite issue so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it an awful lot. This one definitely locked me in for the long haul. I really liked issue 1 and 2, but this was the one that made me go, okay, I'm completely all in.
I'm on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this issue a lot too.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, they're doing such a great job of keeping me interested. And even though I haven't as far my Guardians of the Galaxy knowledge extends to the movie and nothing else. I haven't read any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Although I've been hearing a lot of good things about the new Star-Lord comics, so I've been thinking about checking it out. But so it's been really fun to get another viewpoint of it. Punisher number 9. So I guess they've brought in the new artist who may be doing the art from this point forward, is my guess. The story is still going strong. There wasn't very much of Frank in this issue. It was kind of a side story that relates to everything that's been happening. But I mean, her writing is still really great. I'm not super sure about the new art that they've brought in, but I'm sure it'll grow on me, as things always do. Just seemed a little more cartoony, especially for a Punisher comic.
So, fan casting, who would you if you could have anyone illustrate Punisher with Becky Cloonan writing, who would you have illustrated?
I want Fiona Staples to illustrate everything.
I was going to say Joelle Jones.
I do. I really do love Joelle Jones, and I love Jock a lot too.
Jock would be an interesting Punisher.
He would be. I feel like he would have an interesting kind of more abstract take on it. Maybe. I mean, I love everything he's done, but his work he did on witches specifically just blew me away every time. So that would be really fun to see. Since I knew we were going to be chatting with Liz Prince, I read the rest of her run of the Clarence comics that she did and laughed a whole lot. If anyone out there is not familiar with Clarence, the TV show, you really need to get on that. It's so clever and so funny, and enough ridiculous, gross jokes to make you laugh, but at times is actually really smart and clever and progressive. So.
I just want to say that the first person to contact us to let us know that they watched Clarence based on our recommendation, we will give you 100 Clarence bucks.
Yes. I was like, where is he going with this? Yeah. Yeah. So the comics, Liz Prince wrote 4 issues of Clarence comics, and they're so funny. So funny. You don't need any backstory from the show to love them, but you should do both.
Yeah, I haven't read those comics yet, but I did see the TV show before, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And of course, I love Liz Prince's comics, so
Yeah,
I
yes.
should check these out.
You definitely should. Okay, Supergirl being super. I gushed and gushed and gushed about the first issue
Yeah.
because I loved it. Issue 2, man, I just read it and I feel like I need a hug.
Yeah, it goes in a bit of a new direction. It gets really heavy, really quick.
Yeah, which part of what I loved about the first issue was that it was so vibrant. Feels like a really pretentious word, but that's the only word I can think of to use. You know what I mean? It was really fun. This issue just kind of, man, yeah, it was a rough one to read, but still, I mean, she's an incredible writer, Mariko Tamaki, and I know that it's going to keep going well.
Yeah, I love the way that the characters are being handled. Everything feels real to me. Nothing feels over the top or badly written. Everything feels really well written. I do want to say I like the first issue more, but only by like half a star or something.
Yeah,
and it's just like sometimes it's hard to read something that heavy and be like, yeah, I love this comic.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I did love this comic, but it made me sad.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you know, comics shouldn't be happy all the time.
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
are not.
And we talked a little bit about that with Liz Prince later.
Yeah.
Where I mentioned that sometimes it's more beautiful in a comic to have real life tragedy and to feel that pain than everything to be sugar coated all the time.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So everyone is familiar with Luke Besson.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So pretty excited about this movie he's doing, Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. So I'm already pretty sure that the movie's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I love everything that he does. Looks like it's going to be kind of in the same vein of The Fifth Element, which is incredible. So I decided to go ahead and read Valerian, and I don't know if it's Laureline or Laureline.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to pronounce
I'm not sure
this.
either. If I were a good podcast person, I would have looked that up beforehand, but I didn't. But I read The Empire of 1,000 Planets, which was originally published in French in 1969, and they translated into English just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And so I read it so I could have at least a little backstory when the movie comes out, and it was really interesting. It's definitely kind of a different take on space sci-fi and about, you know, what it says, the empire of 1,000 planets.
Right.
So where, you know, the capital of this planet, they haven't figured out. Apparently everyone else has figured out how to travel through a space-time jump and not the traditional ways like propulsion and whatnot. But these 1,000 planets haven't figured out, or the capital of it hasn't figured that out yet. And so these 2 astronauts are sent to see if they're a danger or could become a danger to Earth and, you know, whatnot. So it was really interesting, especially with, it was set at one point they referenced the year, and it was set in 2720. So it was really fun to watch, especially with what NASA just discovered recently with TRAPPIST. And a lot of those planets on the outer edge of it possibly being similar to Earth, and can support life as we know it anyway. So it was fun to read this comic in the same week that they made that discovery. So definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of his movies or going to be watching it. I think it hopefully will give us enough backstory to enjoy it a little more.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people know that The Fifth Element itself is based off of a lot of imagery and storylines from French comic books as well, from some of those same comics. So I think people should be more into French comic books because they know what they're doing.
They do.
They do a lot of really cool sci-fi and fantasy, or at least have in the past. When I was in France, I went to a comic book store and they just have some of the coolest looking comics. And I was like, man, I really need to learn how to read French because half of these aren't translated.
Yeah.
And I want to know what this story is.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of interesting ideas and concepts in this. Like it talked about the people who run the market, the kind of things that they were selling and whatnot were really interesting. And it was definitely, and it was fun because in the back they had illustrations from the comic and showed side by side pictures from Star Wars that Star Wars had directly taken from the art to create a lot of the things in those movies. That was really fun to see. Vinton, what did you read?
Well, let me get through my normal Marvel stuff. And then I'll talk about the DC titles that I read this time.
Look at you.
Oh, snap.
Well, first off, we already mentioned I did read Supergirl. It was awesome. So, and then Marvel titles, read Gamora. We already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I read the next Infamous Iron Man, which was really interesting. I feel like it was a little bit slower, but I like that we get some different perspectives. You get to see an event from the Thing's perspective, and then they switch and show you the full thing that happened before he ended up not witnessing it. And it was not a lot of information. It was a lot more questions, but still good storytelling. I really like where it's going still. I did finish out the Clone Conspiracy event for Spider-Man that is happening. I think it did finish out the event, but there is still the Amazing Spider-Man, which came out this week, which I have not read, which I guess is going to have something to do with it. And of course, they're going to have all their aftermath stuff where they draw it out for like another year or two, probably. That's how events work, right?
Yeah.
But I thought this was actually a pretty good ending, and maybe even one of the best issues of the event. They kind of just tied things up really well, and I thought it was pretty good. So if you were wanting to get into the Clone Conspiracy to see if that was a good event or not, I think it's probably worth it if you're a Spider-Man fan. If you're not, it's probably not going to be. I read the next issue of Monsters Unleashed, which I thought there was a perfect mix of plot development and action in this issue. So I thought it was a lot better than the last issue, and it's finally going in a way that I might enjoy there. I did start reading the Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and Spider-Gwen crossover, and I thought that was really fun. The Spider-Man issues of it are still being told from like after the fact, and I feel like that just slows the plot down for me, and it doesn't make it as interesting, and it doesn't feel like there's enough plot development because of that. But I do like there's a few fun jokes in there while he's telling the story and people are asking what's going on. And then Genki comes up with his own version and starts telling it. And there's like, dude, he's right here. You don't have to like speculate what happened. But Spider-Gwen, the issues are really good. And it really makes me want to go back and catch up with Spider-Gwen because I have not been reading Spider-Gwen and I should be reading Spider-Gwen. Would you say that's true, Cory?
I think so. I think all the female spider titles are all really good.
Yeah. And then I read Invincible Iron Man #4, the Ryrie Williams. This was another great issue. And I really like that Pepper Potts plays such a big part in it, that she stands up and protects Ryrie. And there's this whole bit with her just really showing herself to be a true hero. I mean, most people I think know that Pepper Potts is a true hero, but if you didn't, this issue will show you. And I like that there's a small moment with Mary Jane and Tony's mom that's really funny. So check that out if you like Iron Man at all, or even if you don't, because I don't really care for Iron Man, but I'm really enjoying Ryrie Williams in general. So that was the Marvel stuff I read. The normal stuff that I've been keeping up with, Cave Carson. I read the new issue of Cave Carson, and this issue was probably the best one yet, I think. It had amazing pacing finally, and a lot of plot development, a lot of action, but there was still good dialogue and information there. And I think I'm going to keep reading. I was starting to wonder if I was going to stop reading it or not in the past few issues, but I think it's got me to at least go another issue or two before making that decision. I also read the second issue of God Country. Did either of you read the first issue of
I
that?
read the first issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have not.
The second issue is so epic. It's
I've
so
heard
great.
Someone at work told me, like, stop what you're doing right now and read God Country issue 2.
Yeah, I don't know how, but they kicked things up to 11 after issue 1.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just so like, the comment that I made about it when writing my notes down was, how can things be so epic while being so peaceful and serene? It's just really cool the way that they're doing it and handling it. The art's beautiful. The writing's wonderful. So I did read some DC though, aside from Supergirl, which I had already started reading before. A comic that I've been excited about coming out for a while is Super Sons, which is the Damian Wayne and John Clark, or John Smith as his alias, I think, which is the son of Superman. They team up and do their own thing in this comic, and I've been looking forward to it because I like those type of stories. I like Damian. I like the idea of Batman Superman team ups. I've always liked those type of comics, so I thought that would be a bit of this, but with more of Damian's attitude, which I think would be really fun, played off of the good Boy Scout young Superman. And it was so perfect, you guys. I need you to read it because it was so wonderful. I loved it so much. There was a lot of great jokes in there, a lot of good action. We didn't get too far into the story, but it really set things up really nicely. And then there was a couple of homage scenes I really liked. There was a Dark Knight Returns homage with them running across the cityscape, and it was so beautiful. Yeah, so I really encourage everyone to check out Super Sons. This encouraged me to finally start reading a couple of other DC titles after Rebirth. I thought about going all the way back to where I was in the Snyder run for Batman, and then realized I was like 40 issues behind.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I was like, I don't know if I'll ever catch up. So I just started at Rebirth, and the Batman Rebirth issue was really pretty good. Of course, the Rebirth issues are kind of like a 0.1 or a 0 in the Marvel, and they just kind of set up a lot of things, but the Batman one was a perfect setup. I think it got me interested. The Batman #1, I really liked a lot. I really liked what Tom King was doing with the story there. It was my Batman, that BA Batman who is just undefeatable, and the worst things can happen, and he's going to find a way to at least do his best, sacrifice his life if he has to save people and to do things, and to fix things. It does have a weird hook at the end where they introduce you to a couple new characters that make you go, oh, what? Who are these people? So I'm interested to find out where that goes. I've only read issue 1 of that. But I also, because of Damian Wayne and my love for Damian Wayne and my love for Super Sons now, I wanted to read more of where he was. So I started reading Teen Titans after Rebirth. And I read the Rebirth issue of that, and it was pretty interesting. Nothing too stand out or crazy for me that I really liked, but has an amazing hook at the end. I really loved it where it ended. So I was like, okay, well, I'll continue reading Teen Titans. And I read, I think, what is going to be the first volume. I think the first 5 issues, the one that just came out recently, and up to the one that just came out recently. And it's okay. It's not fantastic. I really do like Damian Wayne. I think I like all the individual characters. It's just the plot itself I don't really care for, and then the villains in it are just really cheesy. I made a comment that some of the villains are like raised as assassins, and it shows Damian and his cousin fighting when they were like little kids. They had to have been like 5 or something. And of course, they're being raised to be assassins in this like dark castle area, because his cousin has like a red streak in her head. I'm like, oh, the most important part of assassin training is to learn how to dye your hair stylishly. So this is so silly. And so there was just some silliness like that really bothered me and took me out of it a little bit. But the last issue really picked back up for me and made it to where I want to read some more and see where it's going to go. And I really like the way that Damian's being written. So I'm hoping for good things there to come, even though I didn't really enjoy the first volume that much.
So, I don't know if you realized or not, but the current writer for Batman is the former writer for Vision.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? I mean, like, they're two different animals, but how do you feel he handled Batman? Is there anything that, like, if you enjoyed Vision, you'll enjoy Batman, or is it just completely different?
So far, I would say no, but the Rebirth issue was co-written with Scott Snyder, so obviously you're going to get a different animal there. And then I only read issue 1 of Tom King, so I think he was just setting some stuff up, and I didn't really get a taste of what he plans to do or what he wants to do. I've heard some good things about him focusing on some other characters and doing some cool things like Tom King is known to do. Of course, like you mentioned before when we talked about the Vision series was hardly about Vision.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what he does. I'm really interested to follow up on it.
Yeah, okay.
All right, moving on from there, it is now time for our segment. And as we mentioned at the top of the episode, this episode, we have an interview with Liz Prince. For those who aren't familiar with Liz Prince's work, she has worked on the Adventure Time show comic, the regular show comic, the Clarence comic. She has a new comic coming out from Boom Studios called Coady and the Creepies that we are very excited about. And she is mostly known for her autobiographical comics and comic zines and her graphic memoir book, Tomboy. Now, I do have to apologize slightly for the audio quality on this segment. We recorded this interview over Skype, and while it wasn't redlining and it sounded fine in our headphones, apparently something went wrong with all the audio systems we were running it through, and we got a lot of distortion on her vocals. I cleaned it up quite a bit, but was unable to salvage it 100%. We have figured out a way around the problem as to prevent it from happening with future interviews. So apologies once again, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful interview with this wonderful creator.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Cory. This is Vinton, and this is Scout.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Do you want to start out by telling us a little about Coady and the Creepies?
Sure. Coady and the Creepies is the first creator-owned comic series, like month-by-month comic issue that you can go into your store and buy that I've ever done. It is about a touring teenage punk band made up of triplet sisters, and it has a supernatural twist to it. They were involved in a van accident about a year before the comic takes place, which left Cory, the bassist and lead singer, with a scar across her face, kind of Harry Potter-esque. She gets really mad when people make Harry Potter references at her. Chris is paralyzed from the waist down, plays guitar in a wheelchair, and Coady is the drummer, and unbeknownst to her sisters, actually died in the van accident, so she is a ghost.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
We're so
Super
excited about it.
Yeah. I saw that Amanda Kirk, who is also known as Nation of Amanda, is doing the artwork for the comic book. Do you contribute any art, or is it mainly just her?
Amanda and I are doing the subscription incentive cover variants together. So I am drawing those, and she is watercoloring them. I don't know if you're familiar with her work that she's done with Mitch Clem.
Yes, yeah.
She normally watercolors or ink washes his stuff. So she's been doing the colors on those comics. But that's the only artwork that I have contributed to this series.
That's awesome. Have you worked with her before on any collaborations?
Nothing more in depth than I think we drew a Razor Cake comic together when I was visiting her and Mitch. She penciled herself in and Mitch penciled him in, and then I inked all of them.
That's cool.
So it kind of looked more fluid, but I think that's the only time that we've ever worked on a comic project together.
That's cool. So I think that we're most familiar with your work through your personal zines, your comic zines. What got you into making comic zines?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to do something that involved cartoons in some way. And when I discovered comics when I was in third grade, it was like cartoons and books, which were my two favorite things, melded together.
Yeah.
And I've pretty much been solely focused on making comics since then. But it wasn't until I was in high school and I discovered more indie comics and autobio stuff like Evan Dorkin's Dork, autobio work, and Ariel Schrag's high school comic series, Awkward, Definition, Potential, and likewise came out much later on, but that counts, that I really kind of saw the power in drawing comics about my own life. So that was kind of where the turning point was. Before that, I was doing a lot of kind of newspaper gag strip kind of work, and I had a ripoff of Milk and Cheese called Scott the Angry Paper Cup.
That's awesome.
Where they beat up people who ate fast food, because I was a little militant vegetarian, and I had this comic called Bat Rat that was like Batman, but he was a rat. So, I kind of worked my way up to doing my own ideas that were a little less derivative.
That's awesome. Are there any comic zines that you feel are underrated or should be more well known than they are?
I mean, I feel like most of the stuff I read falls under that category.
Sure.
I mean, I've always been someone who has enjoyed people's self-published work and sought that out more regularly than comics that are traditionally published on the mainstream comic circuit. Actually, it's funny because when I was growing up and going to conventions and meeting people, I always found it like way more important to buy the little like photocopied stapled thing that they put together than like their, fancy published book. And I've seen that like there's kind of been this other like people have migrated towards only wanting the like fancy graphic novel version of things. I've actually had people like come up to my table at conventions and I'll have my self-published work and they'll be like, I only want the top shelf one. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you can buy that anywhere. That's fine. I mean, I want them to read whatever book of mine they want. But I enjoy the diary comics of a woman named Carrie McNinch. She's been doing a self-published, daily diary comic for years and years and years called You Don't Get There From Here. I think she's on like issue 40 something. Sam Spina, who currently works on Regular Show, does some diary comic work that I'm really into. I guess if I had a choice, I would pretty much almost exclusively read people's autobio stuff. I have a real soft spot for it, even if it's just kind of the really just rudimentary, like, today I woke up, went to work, came home and watched TV. That's like a typical Ben Steak Pit comic now, but I love it. There's just something about it that's like, it invites you in.
So on the subject of diary comics, we're all Patreon supporters, and we've really enjoyed your monthly diary comics. How has doing that over the last year changed the way that has it changed the way that you make comics or the way that you think about making comics?
Well, that was a project that I started because I was experiencing some really pretty severe writer's block after finishing Tomboy, which was my first like actual quote unquote graphic novel. It was the first thing that I'd ever written that was like 250 pages of like one cohesive story. And that was a process that took about 9 months from like starting to write it to finishing it, which is actually extremely short amount of time for writing and drawing a graphic novel. Yeah. So I felt pretty burnt out, but it was also kind of like the second that I was done with it, people were like, what are you doing next? And I was like, wow, this book isn't even out yet, and I have to know what I'm doing next. And I think I got kind of like paralyzed by the idea of what the follow-up to that book would be. And after close to a year of not really feeling all that inspired to work on, personal comics, I just decided to go back to the basics, which was, hey, I can just draw a comic about what happens every day, and hopefully people will be interested in it. It was also a way for me to get back into self-publishing, which is something that I hadn't done for a very long time. So getting to write and draw those comics and then also design, like a little book and the covers for each one, was something that just really kind of kick-started my my comics creativity again. And that's actually one of the reasons why I've changed the focus of my Patreon this year, was because I found that I was spending all of my personal creative time working on those diary comics and not actually like exploring deeper stories. So that was where the idea to like switch it up and kind of like focus on this longer narrative that will be released in chapters came from.
Yeah, well, they're my favorite part of every month is getting those. And Cory and I read through the last year last night to kind of like jog our memories and everything. And I was telling him that I don't know why, because they're about you, but they make me feel so good about myself. Like they're very self-affirming in a way. And I said, I think the biggest lesson I've taken away is it's okay to nap. I'm sure that's not your intention, but it was like, I shouldn't feel bad about needing a nap every once in a while.
No. I mean, that was, I think that's the power of autobiographical comics, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be this like big, grand, exciting story. Like people can find comfort in just like the little things that are like, oh yeah, that's right, I can like take a break, or maybe nothing good happened today, but there's always tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I downloaded and read your latest one on Patreon, and I did it while I was setting up, and I was like, I'm getting all emotional trying to set this stuff up. This was a bit more emotional than I was expecting to deal with this morning.
That story, I actually, I thought that it would only be like an issue or two, but I think that in the course of writing that first installment, I really realized that it's like a much deeper story. So I think I'm just going to like kind of write it in maybe like a stream of consciousness sort of way and see where it ends up.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's horribly depressing. And it will be interesting to see what my siblings think of it. I did show it to my mom before I put it up on Patreon, just to be like, hey, I don't know if this is going to make you feel weird. And we had a pretty interesting conversation about that as well. But I think that it will hopefully open up a lot of lines of communication. And for people who are confused about what we're talking about, the story that I'm focusing on my Patreon right now is about my relationship with my father, who passed away 5 years ago. And it is not an uplifting story. At least it's not yet. It might be. I don't spoil anything.
Well, I mean, it's therapeutic, I think, for other people in similar situations to read. And I think it really says something for you to put that much of yourself out there.
Right.
I'm not sure that that's something I could do with my own family issues, so that's pretty brave.
Well, it takes some sitting with it for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sure it does.
And to me, that creates even a more beautiful story. Growing up and still being entrenched with superhero comics and that type of thing, it just sugarcoats what life really is. And then when you go and you read a more personal comic like that, it just shows you that there's beauty in the world, even in the pain, even in the suffering and the complications, and you can relate a lot more. It's like not always is Superman dealing with problems like this,
Yeah.
Does putting your personal life out there in comic form, does it make you feel more vulnerable and self-conscious, or is it more therapeutic and make you feel more self-assured to, write it out?
I don't know if I really feel like either end of the spectrum. It's interesting because a lot of times people are like, wow, you share so much about yourself, and I don't know that I could ever do that. And to me, it doesn't feel like a big deal. Like I mean, obviously I know that I'm sharing personal things, but they don't feel like guarded secrets.
Sure.
And I mean, there's definitely stuff that I haven't written about and probably never will write about. But I think that I see more of an intrinsic value in telling those types of stories. And I think that one of the things that I've always tried to be really conscious of when writing about my own life is to not try to make myself come out better in a situation than I initially might have. I don't want to paint myself in this picture that's like, I'm so great. Look at these great things I did. I try to have to be like, oh, that was douchey and I acted douchey in return, or maybe I was douchey. But I don't know. Yeah, the therapeutic aspect of it, it's interesting because I don't go into these situations being like, I need to write this story because I'm going to feel better. And sometimes things hit me way more emotionally than I thought they would, like writing some parts of Tomboy. I was really like, oh, wow, I guess I'm still like really hurt by that, even though I haven't thought about it in like 20 years. So it's just an interesting process, I guess, sometimes I don't know how much something has affected me or still affects me until I'm writing about it. But I guess the like therapeutic aspect is always just kind of like a nice afterthought.
Sure. Okay, so to lighten the mood just a bit, we've read in your monthly comics that you are a member of the National Women's Pinball League.
Yes.
So if you were to create a pinball machine that didn't currently exist, what would the theme of that pinball machine be?
So I actually have like drawn out plans for a pinball machine. There's
That's
Amazing.
a called Drop Target that Alec Longstreth and John Chad put out. They did 7 issues, and each issue they have a different cartoonist create what they call their dream machine. So
Yeah.
it is a pinball machine that doesn't exist. Alec, for all of the issues, since there were 7 issues, he did a machine based off of all 7 Harry Potter books.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So cool.
My favorite pinball machines are always the like horror related ones,
Mhm.
like Tales from the Crypt, Monster Bash, the Elvira machines. Addams Family, I guess, kind of like falls into that. So I thought it would be really great if there was a pinball machine based off of Troll 2.
That would be
That would be
great.
And like some of the elements that I added in it was like in Medieval Madness, when you get the trolls mode, they like pop up, but it would be, like goblins instead because
Yeah.
there's no trolls in
Yeah.
Troll 2. And so that was kind of I think it would be really funny if there was a Troll 2 pinball machine.
That would be
That would be-
amazing.
yeah.
That would be terrific. What horror movie do you feel like every horror fan should see?
I'm like a really crappy horror fan. Like, I think that I like a lot of the like way cheesier movies. I am a really big fan of the Final Destination franchise, and
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of like that's a little bit like illustrative of my point that I like the crappy horror films. But I just really enjoy the like Rube Goldbergian deaths that happen in those
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
And I especially like that it doesn't really waste much time just getting into the like carnage of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would really recommend those to everybody though. Fudge. And I actually am not that like up on my like horror history. Like I actually hadn't really seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Street films until like a couple years ago, and my husband and I like watched through all the Friday the 13th films, and I was like, wow, the first one's really kind of the only good one, huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if I'm a good person to ask about that. I mean, I guess like legitimately good, like well-respected horror films, I really think that Suspiria is like way up there.
Yeah.
Because like visually and mood and all parts of it kind of fit together. So I guess if people haven't seen that, I think they should check it out. And if they want to see some really cheesy shit, watch Final Destination 1 through 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think I watched, I just remember there was a scene in one of them. I don't remember which one, but they were like going to a mall to see a movie, and they were going up an escalator, and like the escalator fell and like killed them somehow. And I watched that movie like 3 times in a row. I was just like so mesmerized by the craziness of it.
Could see that and more.
Okay, one question I wrote down was in last year's April comic that you sent out. You talked about Trailer Blaze.
Yep.
And I was interested to hear a little bit more about that. Just being a woman who's interested in comics, I was interested to see kind of what happened there and what that was like.
So Trailer Blaze is an all-women's comic residency that is put on by the women who run the Short Run Comics Festival in Seattle. And it takes place at this, I don't really know, it's like a multi-purpose lodge in southern Washington on the coast. And they have like refurbished like old 60s RVs that you can stay in, and there are cabins, and then there's actually just like an actual like lodge that has rooms that people can stay in also. They're doing it for the third time this year, I think. And basically what you do is you come and you have your own project, and you talk about what your goals for the project are. And most people kind of just work on their own for most of the day. And then there's group dinners where we talk about what we did or accomplished during the day. And then there are like studio visits where everyone comes to your room or your trailer or whatever, and then you show them what you've been working on and talk about it and get feedback. And it's really great. There's a lot of people who work in very different ways. There was a woman who was doing mostly like cut paper kind of comics and artwork. There was someone who had brought, I don't even remember what kind of a printer it was, but it was like a really old, like Macintosh printer that had like the paper that has the little like holes on the side.
Yeah, they have to tear
and
off.
And they were doing like different, they were taking photos and then putting it through that, and it had like the carbon paper on it also, so it was making these 3 different prints. So it was just like a lot of very different ways of making art and making narratives, but set in this very like kind of funky and folky like lodge setting. There's also a like tourist attraction museum with like taxidermy animals that have like 2 heads and stuff, and a bunch of those old like Nickelodeon machines where you put the coin in, you get to see the little like short movie of people just running around. But it has Jake the Alligator Man.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which is a like alligator merman that's taxidermied, and you can go see him, and he's great. He's a good time.
That's amazing.
And that sounds like so much fun.
What work are you most proud of, do you think?
I mean, probably Tomboy, because of the scope of that book, and the fact that it really did say a lot of what I wanted to convey about gender and my own personal experiences with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's also like quote unquote the latest book that I've done, so I guess I feel like closest to it. But I have been having a lot more fun than I expected to have working on Coady and the Creepies. Not that I expected not to have fun, but I was really viewing it more as like I don't really do fiction, so it'll probably be really hard, but it's actually been really cool to be able to use like real places. Like I've been trying to use real venues, and I'm hoping it's a 4-issue miniseries right now. I'm hoping that it does well enough that we can continue making more of a story out of it. I would like to have actual fans involved. I would like to have them be characters in the show.
That would be real cool.
In the comics. Basically, I want to introduce younger readers to the idea of like DIY punk, and I want it to be real people and real places that are accessible. So hopefully someone can be like, oh, wow, I've never heard of this, but I live in Kansas City. I can go find this venue. Or
So what would your wish list of bands to be involved look like?
I would love, I have personal relationships with, several of the people that I would like to be involved. Like I would like to have Lauren Denizio from Measure SA and Warriors be involved, because I think that she has a lot of really interesting things to say about the punk scene and touring in the punk scene. The comic kind of riffs off of the idea in the new Ghostbusters movie that like the bad guy was really just kind of like one of those like my lady fedora dudes, like all like, oh, nobody likes me because I'm a white man, and so it like kind of plays off of that idea in punk where so many dudes in punk are like, well, why does everyone have to come in here and be so PC? Punk is punk, and if you don't like it, you're a baby.
Yeah.
And it, kind of tries to dismantle that argument a little bit. So I would like to have people and bands involved in the book that like make strides to like combat that idea that like to be involved in punk, you just need to have a real thick skin and stop being a baby. So, in the first 4 issues, I don't know how deep I can really go into that, but I'm hoping that given more space, I could explore that theme a lot more.
Yeah. Having grown up in the punk scene, that is a fantastic idea to me. I love that.
Thank you. Sometimes I'm a little bit like, like how valid of a statement is that anymore? There's so many people who like understand that there's like a real need for diversity in other people's experiences. But I just moved to Portland, Maine, and there's a Facebook group that's like Maine punks. And for some reason last week, some guy on the board like posted like one of those Facebook polls that was like, does punk have like a problem with misogyny? And the answers were like, yes, or like it's a problem with our culture, or like no. And it started this like really like 80 comment long argument where basically like guys were being like, there's no problem, punk is super inclusive, and like women were being like, no, I don't feel that way. And they were being like, well, that's because you're a baby, shut up. Like, I love the idea that like, oh, the person who's had this experience is telling you about it, and you're saying, no, that's not the experience that you're having.
Yeah.
Shut up. So I was kind of like, I read that, and I was like, oh, I guess that is still a thing. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, but it's good that you're, you have goals to combat that.
Yeah. But I also just want to have fun, like talking about things that I like and
Totally.
and music I like and stuff like that too. So.
Yeah, having a lot of friends from the punk scene back in the day that I don't talk to anymore, still friends online in different places. I can say that's totally still a problem, totally still a mindset. It hasn't changed much.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that makes the book sound like way more serious than it is. It's actually like a very lighthearted, like fun book.
Well, that's the best too, is when you can talk about serious issues and still have fun in the book.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, do you have a band or an artist that would make a good soundtrack to your comics in general? Not necessarily that upcoming one, but just your stuff in general?
Well, I actually have a collection of the comics that I have been writing for Razor Cake magazine for the last several years coming out. It's actually going to debut at Emerald City Comic Con, which is next week, but it won't be out for the book market until like July or something. And I was going back through that, and I was like, oh, there are like literally comics in here that are like my mixtape. And so it's like songs that I liked back then. I mean, I think the Ergs is always a band that will have like a place not just in my heart, but also like I feel like the way those songs are written, I feel like are kind of like a perfect soundtrack for my comics. As far as like a book like Coady and the Creepies is concerned, we actually wrote and recorded a song as the band in the book that will be coming out like in conjunction with the first issue in the middle of March. My friend Danny Bailey from the band Jabber wrote the song, and then we had some friends of ours play on it, and it's really cool. I think I'm excited for people to hear it.
That's super rad. I'm excited to hear it, and I'm sure that Vinton and Scout are too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you've written comics for Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Clarence. Were you big fans of those comics before you started writing them, or was it like they approached you and you kind of got familiar with them? How did that work?
Well, Adventure Time is something that I had always wanted to work on. and I was really stoked to be asked to write and draw a short story for the Marceline and the Scream Queens miniseries, because it has to do with music and punk. And so like getting to write that story about Lemon Grab being in a punk band was just kind of like, yeah, man, this is perfect. And it's kind of funny because that like concept became like kind of canon within the comic series. Like it has been referenced in other people's stories, or like they have shown up like in the background of things, which I'm like, oh, cool. This like idea that I came up with is like kind of has some legs. Yeah, especially like writing the Clarence series. That was a show that I was like, oh, I really like this show. And it seemed like a lot of people hadn't really either heard of it or watched it. So getting to write stories for that, I was like, oh, cool. Like this is something that I've been watching like since it came out, and I didn't have to like go back and do like a whole bunch of research about it.
Yeah.
And then the regular show thing, my husband is like a huge fan of regular show. I like regular show, but he's like way more into it than I am. And so that was kind of like we both came up with like story ideas for that. And so he kind of worked on that like in tandem with me.
Yeah. You saying about Clarence is funny, because when we discovered Clarence, like we have 3 kids and we were watching it with them, and I think that we became Clarence evangelists. Like everyone ran into, we're like, oh my God, have you watched Clarence? Because you need to be watching this.
I felt like it was better than anything else that was on TV. Like not even just like children's shows, but like just across the board. It was just such a funny show.
Yeah, and it was pretty progressive and everything. I mean, especially for I mean, I know Cartoon Network is more progressive than a lot of things, but I feel like they still kind of, walk that line sometimes. So,
yeah, definitely. And it was fun because Brian Gorsinger from Nightbirds is like a huge Clarence fan, I guess. So I like posted online that I was writing those comics, and he wrote to me and he was like, oh my God, that is like so cool. My daughter and I, we love Clarence. That's crazy. And then I gave him like some copies of the book in exchange for like getting me on the guest list at one of their shows. And he was like, so like, are you like super famous now? And I was like, no, I don't think you're the only person who's like ever been excited about the Clarence talent, like in relation to me. And so that was kind of like a funny experience.
Yeah. Well, those 4 issues are some of like, they make me laugh out loud every time. That first issue where he dresses up like the worm, like
I love that.
I read it in the comic book store. We're standing there and I'm cracking up laughing. It's so good.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think is that all the questions we have written down?
That's all of our questions. Do you have anything that you want to add or you want to promote?
Buy my book.
Yes.
My books. No, I mean, really, I just am hoping that people will pick up Coady and the Creepies and give it a try. I was really stoked to be able to give Amanda Kirk kind of like a vehicle for getting like a wider audience for her comics. And actually that's like one of the main like reasons why I even pursued like creating this series. Like I think that if they had told me that Amanda couldn't be the artist on it, I'd probably be like, all right, well,
Never
peace. And I think it came out great. Hannah Fisher, who colored it, did an amazing job. I like don't have an eye for color, and so when we got like the first couple of pages back, like lettered and colored, the like color palette for it is like very like bright pinks and like yellows and greens and like some colors that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like buildings in the background or like pink. And I was like, wow, that's like so awesome, but I never would have thought of that. And so it's been like a cool experience to get to see like what other people are doing with this concept somewhere else along the line.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
My website is lizprincepower.com. It has nothing to do with white power. And my last name is not Prince-Power, which I actually get a lot. Like people write, they're like, "Dear Miss Prince Power," and I'm like, "Fudge." It actually came from when I was younger. My younger brother and I used to call our family's gray station wagon Power of the Gray Car after Power of the
Yeah.
from Heat-Man. And so I kind of always just like had this idea that like, yeah, power, it's such a cool thing. So
Yeah.
Liz, power, like, wee. And I don't know, I'm a little bit like regretting that at this point. But it's been so many years, it's just going to stick. So LizPrincePower.com, it has links to all my social media where you can follow me and look at pictures of my cats.
Yes.
And I make announcements about my books that are coming out and what conventions I'm going to be at and XYZ on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to interview you and talking with us today.
Yeah, no problem. It was great.
All right, that was our interview. I hope you guys all enjoyed it as much as we did. We had a blast recording that interview. Now, we have some comic book news.
Oh, well, I saw on Twitter 2 things that I understood, but also made me sad. The first of which is that Kate Leth has been writing Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat. That's going to be ending in a couple issues.
This is
Oh.
sad.
Wah, wah, wah. Yeah. So, but the comic has been incredible and she's done such a great job. So, I mean, sometimes it's better to leave things on a high note, you
Yeah.
know?
We saw it with Tom King's Vision.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if that had
So-
gone on too much longer, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that Tom King would ruin it or anything, but a lot
Right.
of times comics go on too long and you find a lull, and all of Vision was amazing. There wasn't a single lull
Mhm.
in it. And so had it gone on, there would, of course, have been a lull at some point.
Right. Cough, cough, Walking Dead. Also, one of my favorite comics of this year that I've been reading, Chris Samney's Black Widow is going to be ending
Ugh.
as well, which
So disappointing.
shot to the heart.
Yeah.
And I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. I think it's an incredible example of proof that a man can write a feminist comic.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there's a woman suited to the job, I would love for women to get these comics to write
Right.
about strong women. However, in these Black Widow issues, he proves that a man can do it as well. So I don't think that we should automatically discount a comic about a woman just because a guy is writing it.
Yeah.
So all of those have been so, so great. I'll be sad to see them end, but once again, gonna leave it on a high note. Both of those comics, by the way, I believe I saw that they're gonna be Marvel will be releasing, like a collection of those.
Yeah.
So it'll be nice. There is something to be said for having one whole story that you
Yeah.
can just read
Yeah.
in one
I
go.
agree.
So I'm really excited to, when they do release those, to live through them again and be
Right.
able to share those with my friends and show, you can write superhero comics and make them, in the case of Hellcat, make them fun and quirky.
Yeah.
And part of the great thing about that comic was I think it was about friendship, It was about women being together and
Yeah.
supporting each other. And then as far as Black Widow, I mean, a superhero story that doesn't necessarily have to do with just her running around and beating people up. It showed the human side and was really great as far as the plot was. So it'll be sad to see those end, but I'm sure that they, all these creators are going to go on to make even greater things.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about when a series does end and it's a little bit shorter, doesn't go on for hundreds of issues,
Mhm.
is that you can easily go, hey, you should read this series. And someone doesn't
Yeah.
have to go, well, where do I start?
Yeah.
And so it's like, hey, I have the whole thing here. You can read it.
Read this.
It's completed.
Oh,
This is the whole thing.
Yeah, and I love doing that with Hawkeye in particular too. I
Yeah.
mean, Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. There have been so many people that it's like you can just hand out these volumes and be like, read these.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot less daunting to catch up on because I'm
Mhm.
behind on Hellcat.
yeah, it'll make it less scary.
Yeah.
Did you guys hear this week that the first name was released for cast of Inhumans television show?
I did.
I didn't, I don't think. What was it?
Okay, this is gonna be fun because I'm gonna mispronounce his name. It's Iwan Rihan, maybe. I don't know. He was also on Misfits, and Game of Thrones. I recognize him from Misfits.
Oh yeah, I
The
recognize
British
him
show.
I
from
think
Misfits.
it's Iwan, but I could be wrong.
I'm sure you're right.
I don't know. I know he has real pretty eyes.
Bluest eyes.
So now we can't be mad at us for mispronouncing his name.
So,
He
but
has
he's
lovely
going.
eyes.
He's going to be playing Maximus.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an incredible actor. I can't say too much for the work he did on Game of Thrones because I quit watching right around the time that he entered the series. But from what I saw, he was great in it. And Misfits is a great series if no one's checked it out. And he was incredible in it.
One of those series that, while it's not about comic books, I think comic book fans will all enjoy.
Definitely.
Have either of you had the chance to watch Legion yet?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Man.
I love it so much. It's so different
Yeah.
from anything else
Oh, it's
happening
so
right
beautiful,
now.
too.
It's
I'm just going to
gorgeous.
put this out there. Legion is the Doom Patrol of television.
I think so.
I
Yeah,
think
it makes
so,
me think
too.
of Doom Patrol a lot. Have you seen, how many episodes have you seen?
We've seen two.
Two.
Yeah,
The
we haven't
third
watched the
episode
third.
even, I think, yeah, the end of the first one, most of the second one, and the third one just expands on this. Makes it feel like that old 60s like team up thing.
Yeah.
It has a lot of that Doom Patrol feeling to it. And it reminds me a lot of old, like the old show, The Prisoner, the old British show, because it's like that 60s psychedelic feeling to
Yeah.
it, which I just really love. But the whole show is just really aesthetically pleasing. All the things they do, even when it gets scary and dark, it's just like, this is just beautiful, too
Yeah.
beautiful to look at to be scared.
Yeah, definitely. I'm loving it so much. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
All right, so moving on to recommendations. Cory, what do you recommend all of us read?
Okay, I'm going to recommend that everyone go to Patreon, and after you support Read Brave Comics and Graphomania Podcast Network, that you support Liz Prince as well. I know that we, for like a $7 a month, she will mail you a physical copy of a comic zine that she's made, and you get access to the pages as PDFs before before she mails it to you. Over the last year, she's done a diary comic where she's written just like a strip every day for the entire year, and we, in preparation for the interview that we did today, Scout and I reread over the last year worth of comics, and they're all just so wonderful. They're so great. They make you feel happy and excited. I told Scout, like, when I read Liz Prince's comics, it makes me feel like the feeling I had when I listened to Punk for the first time, that like this was something that was mine, that like I could claim ownership to, that got me, that understood me, and they're just really wonderful. So I recommend that everyone go support her Patreon and get access to her comics and read her Patreon comics.
Yes, do that thing.
Scott, what do you recommend?
Well, definitely what you recommended. My favorite thing that Liz Prince has written was Tomboy. I think that, especially when you're younger, if you are a girl who isn't necessarily the girly girl, you do feel out of place. And, you know, she touched on a lot of things that just resonated with me and was like, oh, I remember feeling those same feelings, having those same emotions. So much of it is important, and it deals a lot with gender identity and gender issues, and, you know, just embracing who you are and not letting other people influence who you become as a person as you grow. Beyond that, I think people should definitely be checking out Gamora. So we're just 3 issues in. 3rd issue has been the best so far. The art is incredible. I mean, even if the story wasn't good, I would probably keep buying them just to look
The
at
art's
how
pretty
pretty
fantastic.
they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, the colors are just, man, it's so good all the way around. So everyone should be checking that out for sure. Vinton?
I already showed my hand a little bit, but I highly recommend that everyone reads Super Sons #1 and maybe even just puts that series on your pickup list at the comic book store because I guarantee it's going to be great. I didn't know either of the creators going in, but I'm going to have to look at some of their work from the past and check it out because I really enjoyed the art. I really enjoyed the writing. It was all beautiful.
I was not going to give this comic a chance, so I'm going to trust you and I'm going to read it.
Next time on Read Brave Comics, Cory.
That was worst.
Terrible. I quit podcasting
You
because
don't know
of this.
anything about comics.
All right, that was our show. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Graphocast, GRAPHOCAST. And if you can, give us $1 or more a month to get some extra goodies over there. You can check us out online with our new Twitter. We now have a Twitter aside from the Graphomania Podcast Network. It's at @read_brave because Read Brave is taken and so is RB Comics, sadly, even though those people aren't using their Twitter accounts. So if you're listening, those people have those Twitter accounts, which you're not. We would like them. Thanks. But you can always still follow the Graphomania Podcast Network for all of our podcasts at Graphocast. Personally, I'm at Flesh Eater.
I'm at home.
Cory's at nothing.
I'm at not ever using social media again, except till in like 6 months when I sign up for all of them again.
And I'm at Scout Casto.
We'll be back next week. That's right. You didn't mishear me. Next week, not 2 weeks from now, with an interview with Kelly Thompson, who's doing the new Hawkeye series for Marvel. We wanted to get these interviews out pretty quickly, so we're not starting our weekly version of this podcast yet, but we wanted to get this one out next week, and then we'll be going back to our every other week schedule. Until next time, check out our website, graphocast.com and readbrave.com. Maybe we'll update it one day.
Someday, maybe. Probably not.
Excelsior!
What did one Japanese man say to the other Japanese man?
Nope.
Like that Scott's just like, nope, it's over.
I don't know. I don't speak Japanese. That was a good one. That was a really good one.
I might have to put that in there just because of the way it went down. This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, GRAPHOCAST.com. Follow us on Twitter at Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.